Hello my friend, welcome to this new watercolor tutorial. What really happens when your brush holds more water than paint? Does it make your color glow or does it completely ruin your painting, right? So in this video, I will put too much of water in this particular area, and we'll see how does it actually impacting your in proportion the amount of water and the color, and how does it actually impacting your artwork. And this side we will also see comparison, how much ratio you should be basically using it in your artwork. Hello my friend, before we jump into this tutorial, I'm offering you one of the very interesting watercolor lesson, and this is going to be absolutely free for you. This lesson is about how to paint loose watercolor, and the looseness in watercolor painting is it's a very interesting subject to paint on, and you should be knowing how to paint that. There are some of the very interesting technique, and there are certain practice which is required, and I'm through this watercolor lesson I'm trying to explain that step by step. This is going to be really interesting for you, and a lot of people who receive this tutorial, so they are just thanking me. They're just saying, Nitin, I'm really enjoying this tutorial, and that really made some changes in their watercolor journey. So I would like you to just check that out. The link I've given in the description, and I'm sure that you'll have really good time with this lesson. Now let's jump into this tutorial. So before we start this, I wanted to let you know the tricky part about the ratio part. It also depends the what kind of paper you are using it. What I mean is, if you are using the 100% cotton paper, and you are using the water, let's say for 70-80%, it still absorb your water. Your paper absorbs a lot of water into it, and you'll not find a much difference. Okay, uh, but if you don't have a too much of cotton into it, so there you'll have a problem. So it also depends on what kind of paper you're using it. And second thing is, it also depend the size of your brush. So currently what I'm using is very small. It's a number 0 size, or number 2 or 3, something like that. I'm using it because it's a smaller sheet of paper. But when you are using the mop brush, which is like a 10 or 12 number brush, it holds a lot of water. So you should be very careful what kind of a painting you are making it, whether it's a pretty much big large painting you are making it. So it also depends on this usage of the brush, right? That was number 2. And the third number is, it also a factor that brings as the color. Some brand, that color, their pigments is so contrast that even if you'll just put a good amount of water, but still holds a lot of contrast into it. These are the parameters you'll have to be little aware of this, because these are the tricky thing, right? It's not just about how much water you are just taking and putting the color into it and all that. Apart from that, these are the tricks, the tricky part basically, I would call it, you should be consider, you know. Right, so let's start. I'll be using this one. So generally, why we get so much of the blooming uh, thing in our painting is that, now see, I'm using the color. I'm just taking several time. Okay, but I have just taken for our reference purpose, I've just kept it here, the water here itself. So I've just used here a lot of water basically, and this is the primary reason why your painting looks very washed out when it's dry, especially when you are applying the first layer. I'll just apply it here. So I've applied it here, your first layer. This is our first layer, right? So I just applied it here. Let's say I want to use some other color also. I'm using ultramarine blue here into this, and again I'll take a water here. Okay, I'm using a bit of, let's take an example, I'm using almost like a 90% of the time I'm using the water, and 10% is color. Okay, and I've just applied it here. Say I've just applied it here. Now again I want to use this ultramarine blue, and I've applied the water here again. Now see, you feel like, okay, I mean that's a very good pigment. It still holds a lot of the contrast into this, but when you actually apply it here, okay, when you apply it here, let's say this example. So this is the one of the reference, the example I have just taken it here. I'm using this horizon green, and I'm again using almost like a 90% time water. Okay, so this is the time when we have used several layer of water into this, and we still, whenever we apply some other color, let's take example here, we wanted to use the same color here, ultramarine blue, into this. So again I'll take this much of water and we'll just apply it here. Okay, and then for this I'm using, for the ground I've used yellow ochre, and I mix this color, like I can just take a sap green. Okay, and I've used water here. I've used all these water into this. All right, so this is your first layer, and see, the amount of water we have used it's too much. It's about like a 90% of the time we have just taken, but this is still okay. Okay, the first layer you should use a good amount of water, but what happens when you'll go for the second layer, and there you will see the difference. Okay, so before starting this, applying the second layer, let's work on the same thing here, the first layer, how you'll do it, right? So I'm using here the same method, and now see, I'm just taking this burnt sienna, and instead of just dipping my entire brush, I'm just in the tip, I'm just taking a little bit of water. Okay, but water quantity should be there. It's not like you should not have it all. So I'm using it here. So it's too dark happens. So I'm using it here, and I'm using a little bit of water here again, and I'll just apply it here on this. Now see, when you apply here on this, I've just taken, can you observe that when we have applied our first layer here, it wasn't so contrast, but here we just got some bit of contrast, right? Why it happened? Because we have just taken a very little water. I mean, first layer when you're doing it, it's okay to use a bit of water. I mean, the ratio should be almost like 60 to 70% of your water, and rest of the thing like a 30 to 40% of your color. So that is the thing. But it also depends on how much, what is the volume of the paper, or what kind of a painting you are just making. That also make a difference, right? So now we got it. We also want some bit of variation here, so I've just used it here, and I'll take a little bit of water and I've just applied it here, something like this. Okay, now the same thing, it goes here. Now I've just taken, now see the amount of color I've used, and I've just taken this much of water, and let me just apply the color here. Okay, so if I want to add, I'll just add a little bit of color and bit of water, same proportion, and here we got that. And probably we can add a little bit of depth here. All right, so that is the thing. Now we wanted to paint the tree, so same method, I'm just using yellow ochre, a bit of sap green, and a very little water, because this, we wanted to have some kind of a texture effect into this on the tree. So I'm using this olive green, mixing them all together, and I'm not using too much of water in this. And here we just wanted to make things a little texture sort of work. Okay, and we wanted to have more a darker pigment, so I've just taken this, I've just directly I've just taken this color, ultramarine blue, and I've used a very little water, very little, and I've just taken a bit of things. So I wanted to make a little thickness into this, and I'll add a little water, and here we go. And somewhere just okay, and now let's see the contrast. It's a pretty good contrast we got. Now we have the wall, and we wanted to use, let's remove this water, I mean the color. I'll just mop this color. Okay, now I'll take this fresh ultramarine blue, and now see the amount of almost like a 30%, and mostly around 60% of water, and I'll add a bit of almost like a 10% of this other color, like this Banciana. And if you look at here, so this color, it's actually flowing, there's a too, it's a good amount of liquid, but doesn't have too much of water. Too much water like this, it's like it flows all the way. We have I have this plate which is like around 15-20% 20-degree angle, but it doesn't flows there. That means that it has some bit of thickness. Now let's apply this color. Okay, I'll add a little bit of color here into this, and there is a couple of person just in front of this house. Okay, so we got that, the second, I mean the wall color. Now if I want to have some interesting texture, I can just do that. Now see, like I've just taken very plain water and I've just applied it here, so you get a very interesting, or you can just sprinkle it a little, so you get a very interesting texture into this if you want. I mean, not really, I mean, required, but you just add some value into this. All right, this is the value of the color, almost like a 60 to 70%, 60% at least water, 40% color, everywhere the same. Now come back to, I mean, come to this the same way what we have done here. We need to make a ground, so I'll use this sap green and mixing them with all, and I'll add a bit of color here because we wanted to have some contrast, so I'll use here, I'll use a little bit of water into this, almost like a 70% water. Okay, and let it blend together. And if you want to have some more texture into it, so we'll use a little darker pigment mixing. All right, so this is what we have in our first layer, right? Let it dry. All right, so now let's come back to this one, and you see after the first layer dried, how, I mean, it just fade out, right? It's very faded. Whereas if you look at this, because we have used the good ratio of color and the water, you see good amount of the contrast. The values is still intact into this. So that's the very first thing you'll see in your article. But first layer, even if you are to till this level, that's pretty much fine. But what happens when you're doing your second layer? And this is exactly where most of the beginners are struggling, and I just wanted to bring in here. Now let's remove this color. I'm using for this roof, the values is still they use the same. That's the biggest. I've just taken this color and I've just taken a lot of water, exactly the way we have taken in our first layer, and this is what basically they do. Okay, they just apply it here like this, and if they want to use some other color, they'll again take water, too much of water, and this is what happens. Okay, for the tree, so the color is fine. Now the amount of water basically being used here is, again, it's like a 90% of the time, 90% is water, 10% or 20% is like a color being used here. Okay, so that's the thing you see here. Now when you go for the painting the wall, we'll use the same color here, and the water, I'm just taking the water from here. Okay, you see here good amount of water being used, and you'll just use it here. So you'll just take a color, you'll add water, on the side. Okay, I'll just pour a bit of water here. All right, now again for the roof we'll use water. Okay, this is what happens, and to make some adjustment, they'll just keep pouring the color and water. If you want to bring some darker pigments here, so you'll put a lot of water and the color to find the real value you wanted to bring into this, and you just keep pouring. Sometimes they just pour water here like this, sometimes like this, because there's a lot of water in your brush. But you see, this is the biggest problem, because they wanted to have some dark pigment here, so they'll take color and just applying the color here all over the place to get the real value. But you see here, everything is actually bloating. It just, everything is merging here. There's a lot of bloomings happens here, right? These are the biggest problem. You see there's some explosion happen also with the texture. Sometimes it is deliberately done, but most of the time that was unintentional. And now when you paint the ground, this is what happens. Everything is basically merged, because you wanted to paint green here, and you have just taken a lot of water, and you just applied here something like this. Okay, and I've seen many times that the people, they just feel like, okay, I'll add some color here on the middle, and they just try to be, that caution comes itself, that okay, I should not use water now, I'll just use color, and they'll just do something like this, some patches, something like this. It happens. So everything is actually merged. Things are not very clear. Okay, and most of the time we see this, the detail is actually goes away. There's no detail available anymore, and just make something like this and all that. The people, they'll just use a direct color here, and things are merged. So when you look at this entire thing, you'll see like, oh, my watercolor is not going anywhere. There's a lot of blooming happens. There's a lot of splash all over the place. I've just, whatever I did, I've seen that, somehow it's still, it got some bit of neatness here, but I've seen there's a lot of color here, and that looks very, very unpleasant, and that's not the good way, because you have used water so much of water in your brush all over the place. That's the biggest problem that people are making. Now the question is how to solve this. How you should be knowing when and how you should be using the proper ratio of water and the color. And that's exactly we are going to learn into this. All right, now let's jump into this. Now here we wanted to have some bit of texture here because the light is coming here, and we want to have some bit of color, some bit of texture into it. So what I'll do is I'll just take a color, let's say for this much of color, and very little water here. Okay, very little water. If you feel like, oh, this is still very light, I can go ahead and I can take a more color into it, and I'll add a bit of other color, just like a 10% this, 5% this, and I'll make some texture here, like unbroken lines here and there, to just say an idea that okay, this is the roof. Okay, I'll add a little color here and very little water, and I'll just wanted to get an idea that okay, this, because of this tree, there is a good amount of the seeds are actually falling here. So I'll just use burnt sienna as a primary, and there's a lot of contrast, so I'll add a little bit of water into it. Okay, so this basically, we just wanted to give an idea that okay, this is basically the shade of this tree. Okay, now we wanted to have this tree. Now you see how much water I'm using it here. I've just taken this color, let's say 30% this, 30% this. All right, we got a good amount of thickness here. Second layer, you should have a good amount of thickness in your color, and here we got thickness. We just remove the extra water, and I want to make a little more thick color here. And some interesting edge as well. Okay, and here I'll just pour a bit of water to make things a little realistic. Some scratch here and there, and now I'll make this. I see how much water I've not used. Whatever the water is available, I'm just using the same water here, and just wanted to bring some depthness here into this. Okay, so I still believe that we should have some more texture into it. Now I just wanted to make some line here to represent, to bring an idea that okay, this is the roof, and I wanted to have in the same color here. Okay, so that's the idea. Now We wanted to paint this wall, and I using again the same color here, ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And now see, I want to make it a little more darker here. So the ultramarine is very prominent in this one, and this is basically going all the way to this section and applying the darker pigments here all the way. Now see how the darker, can you just see this, how much the depth we just wanted to use it here, because we have used so much of water, so everything is blended, everything is actually floated. Now see, things are very controlled, things are in controlled. And we just wanted to have this. Okay. And there's a couple of people here. We'll paint it later, but this is what it is here. Now see here, still you see these patches, still you see the lights here, the edges, everything is pretty much prominent here. Now we wanted to paint a little more. Now see how much water is there, but not so much. So I'm just trying to make things very much dark here. Everything is pretty much darker. Okay. And this just joint here, and we wanted to have more darker pigments here. So right now I'm not using water at all. It's just like whatever the color was there, because I wanted to make more and more darker pigments here in this area. Okay. Maybe just some scratches here and there, so to highlight something. Okay. Now see, things are become a little more prominent here. Things are very obvious and all that. And now we can make some highlight here and there. Something like this. So we just wanted to make this area a little prominent. Okay. So you see these lights and things are here becomes a little more. I can just make some little interesting texture into this. Doing something like this. Okay, now you see water is absolutely, there's no water in my brush, almost like a dry stuff here, and I'm just making things some values here and there, some fencing and all that. And now I can add this person. There's a couple of people here, just outside of their farmhouse or whatever. So that we can just bring in here. Like that. Once this get dry, so we can just make even more little more prominent. We can just using this orange color to make some highlight here and there. Okay, so this is what you see here when you do your when you use your color properly. The ratio should be properly, and this is what you get. And I hope this has brought some interesting learning to you, and I'm sure that once you'll apply these learning to your artwork, you'll see the real value. All you have to do is the practice something like this, and you'll see things are getting better. From you are actually moving from this to this very soon. So thank you so much everyone watching this tutorial. I'll be coming with a new tutorial very soon. Till then, take care, enjoy, and create so much of art. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, I'm inviting you to join my watercolor art community. This community where you want to be, because you will be meeting a similar mindset of people and the same values and the same vision what you have. And you will also have a very structured watercolor learning week by week. And it's not just about the watercolor, it's more about making a connection, making a real connection with a similar mindset of people. And I'm seeing a lot of people, they are improving, they are going from one level to another level, and this is how their progress is happening in this platform. So I'm inviting you to join this global watercolor art community, and I'm sure you're going to like it. And I'll see you next video very soon. You can watch this particular video for you, and if you wanted to be part of this Patreon watercolor art community, you can join this community clicking on this. Thank you so much, and have a great day.